Hello, everybody. Hello. Come on in. Take a seat. Take a virtual seat. My name is Ahmed Dents. Welcome back to We Are Listening, or those of you who have been here before, welcome back. As you hear me echo, I'm echoing myself. For those of you who have been here before, welcome back. If you have not been here, welcome to We Are Listening. This is our bi-weekly salon, talking about the perspectives and experiences of Black theater artists, administrators, various professionals, and everybody who works in the industry. Again, thank you for joining us. We are here every 2 weeks. We are going back to back this week. This is a very special episode. I'll be introducing our guest to you in just a moment. My co-host Jacole could not join me tonight, but she will be back with us tomorrow night, same time, 5:30. Tomorrow night is a special board member episode featuring Jasmine Sadler, new board member here at San Diego Repertory Theatre. We'll also be talking to John Brooks, board member at Moxie Theater, and Stephanie Bolger, who is a board member at the Old Globe. So it will be a spectacular episode. We'll be talking about things from the board member point of view. That is tomorrow at 5:30. Head on over to sdrep.org/listening to register. You can also head to our Facebook page at San Diego Repertory Theatre and get a link to register there as well. Remember, this is in partnership with the Old Globe and La Jolla Playhouse. And if Jacole was here, she'd be talking to you about what's going on at La Jolla Playhouse. But for tonight, I will tell you, head on over to lajollaplayhouse.org and also head over to the oldglobe.org to see what's going on, all the great programming that they have for you right now. A couple of announcements of what's going on around here at the Rep. Tomorrow night is the 19th annual Klezmer Summit, Jews, Jazz, and Justice. Yeah, this is going to be a good one. Make sure you head on over to sdrep.org and get your tickets. Tickets start at $18. You can upgrade to a sponsor ticket for $36 and receive a copy of Yale Strong's documentary, The Last Klezmer, Life and Times of Leopold Kozlowski. I hope I pronounced that right. Look, my name is Ahmed Dents, so you got to give me some leeway. Like, names get pronounced wrong sometimes. But please make sure you head on over to sdrep.org and get your tickets to the Klezmer Summit. It's going to be an absolutely spectacular show tomorrow. Also want to remind you, beginning on what is the date? The date is November 22nd. It is Hershey Felder, a Paris love story, live. Yes, live from Florence. That begins streaming on November 22nd at 5 p.m. Again, head on over to sdrep.org to get your tickets. And I want you to join us on December 1st, Tuesday, December 1st. It is Giving Tuesday, and we have a day of virtual events lined up for you, a whole day of virtual events on Giving Tuesday, and we'll be giving you more details about that. I'll give you some more details about that tomorrow, and make sure you look ahead for more details on our website. And again, come back and join us tomorrow. Jacole will be back here with me, and we'll be talking to Jasmine Sadler, San Diego Repertory Theatre board member, John Brooks, Moxie Theater board member, and Stephanie Bolger, Old Globe board member. But again, a couple of housekeeping items before I introduce my guest. Please make sure that you have your camera and your video turned off. And you want to select in your settings to hide all non-video participants. So again, make sure you have your camera and your mic off. And with that, I am going to introduce to you tonight's guest. Tonight's very special guest in this very special episode. As we know, the summer that we're living in, the summer of COVID, the summer of racial misunderstandings, racial heat, really exacerbated by the death of George Floyd earlier this year, has put the whole industry, the whole world in a place of really recognizing equity, inclusion, and diversity. And the Rep has set forth a action plan to further these things. And tonight I would like to bring on camera with you, please welcome San Diego Repertory Theatre Artistic Director, Sam Woodhouse. Come on into the room, Sam. You're muted as we always are in Zoom fashion.
Unmute. Welcome, unmute. The new greeting.
How you doing, Sam?
Hi, Ahmed. Thank you for having me.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you for coming on. Again, everybody, Sam Woodhouse, he is the artistic director here at San Diego Repertory Theatre, and we are going to be primarily talking about the Rep's action plan moving forward when it comes to issues of equity, diversity, and inclusion. But as in we are listening fashion, I always ask the guests to give us a little bit of their background from their own mouth. I know a lot of you know who Sam is, but there might be a couple people on the call who don't. So Sam, why don't you go ahead and give us a brief introduction of yourself and let us know about you and how the Rep got started.
I'm going to answer this question through the perspective of the topic of the conversation. I was trying to think tonight when this issue, the issue of justice and equity and diversity and inclusion first entered my consciousness. That would have been when I was in college. I was 18 years old. Something that I will never forget is walking to the library and being stopped by a Black Panther with a giant afro who said something to the effect of, "Where do you think you're going so easily and freely, young white man?" And it stopped me in my tracks. And I said, "What did you say?" And I can't remember the rest of the conversation, but I was deeply imprinted upon me was this challenge, this question of, where do you think you're going so easily and freely? Jump forward to 1991, long after the Rep had been founded. The playwright Amiri Baraka, who used to be called Leroy Jones, who wrote The Dutchman, the sort of seminal race play, of the 60s. White girl meets a Black man, young man on the train in subway, New York, and violence ensues. Leroy Jones, very famous, became Amiri Baraka, famous poet, a pillar of the New York activist, literary and theatrical scene. We commissioned him to write a play about Bumpy Johnson, the Black hero of the Harlem Renaissance, or criminal of the Harlem Renaissance, depending on who you talk to. And one night, Amiri said to me, "You know, the difference between you and me, Sam, is you got to know about you, but I got to know all about me and all about you." And I've never forgotten that challenge, that injunction, that piece of information. In 1988, I was in the 7-Eleven in Golden Hill, where I lived for quite a while. And I had this epiphany. And now imagine having an epiphany in a 7-Eleven.
Got a couple.
You have? Okay. Yeah, I'm there. I looked around and I said, you know, the people in this store represent a diversity that you don't see on the San Diego Rep stage or in its audience. We got to do something about that. And so in 1988, we began a program called Teatro Sin Fronteras, Theater Without Borders, which has led to the production of over 55 main stage Latinx plays in our history. We're one of the leaders in the country in producing Latinx material. We've produced about 25 works by African-American writers over the decades. I've been here for 44 years, so going back to the founding is many, many moons ago. Luis Valdez was a great influence upon me, the father of Chicano theater, a brilliant and wise man speaking truth to power, and a voice for diversity and justice, going way back to the 60s. I grew up, you know, I came of age during the 60s with the sexual revolution, the Chicano revolution, the Black Panther movement, the anti-war demonstrations against the war in Vietnam. And I founded this theater because I didn't want to work for anyone else, such as a tidbit. But to the point, I've always been sort of passionately curious. I'm not that interesting of a person, but I'm really curious about people and stories and places that I don't know or understand. People are not like me. And I think that has fueled our track record of quite a few works by writers of color, Black writers, Indigenous writers, art writers of color. And we have had for 4 years and for 2 more, Herbert Siguenza, Latinx genius writer, on our staff as a playwright in residence. Luis Valdez was in residence for quite a while. The jazz drummer Max Roach worked on a musical of Midsummer Night's Dream many decades ago, which I'm very proud of. And I guess historically, I would just say two things. One is we believe, as far as we can tell, that over 50% of the actors on our stages and over 50% of the playwrights who've written the plays that are on our stages in the last 10 years have been Black, Indigenous, or writers of color. So that's a statistic and that I'm very proud of. And in last May, we commissioned 5 new plays, full-length plays by Filipino American writers, queer, transgender, yellow American writer, Native American writer, African American writer, and 2 of the plays are set in San Diego. So we're really trying to do what we can do to nurture and fertilize the voices of a diverse America, which brings us to the summer of George Floyd and the protests in the streets and the cry for social justice. And in a manifesto, which was written last summer, signed by 300 artists, theater artists of color, called "We See You, White American Theater." And if you haven't read this manifesto, I highly recommend it. It's an amazing document. It is full of fury and judgment and condemnation, and essentially takes the American theater to task from every department: trustees, audience, leadership, production, actors, ushers, box office, as all being living inside a world of white supremacy and systemic racism. And a second document came out from this group that challenged the American theater to make changes to address essentially the call for equity and justice and racial justice, which led us to the creation of this plan that we call the Equity, Diversity, and Inclusion Strategic Action Plan. So there's a long answer to your question.
That's okay.
That's how we got here.
That's all right. Let me ask you the common question that I get all the time. And, now we have the opportunity that you're here. You can answer this question yourself, because the main question I always get is, how did this platform right here, how did We Are Listening start? And I always say, well, you know what? This came to me from Sam Woodhouse. Kim Howell talked to me about it, and we talked about it. And I know we'll get to it, because I always tell people, my first question to Kim was like, well, why are we doing this? Right. Why don't you give us a little background about how We Are Listening actually came about?
Well, when this plan came out, we read the artistic leadership of the organization. Todd Salovey has been until a week ago, was my single associate artistic director for 28 years. And so we've been working for almost 3 decades together. We both read the We See You, White American Theater manifestos and went, oh my God, oh, wow. What do we do? How do we respond to this? What's the first step we should take? And Todd said something like, well, we certainly need to do a lot of listening. And out of that thought, either out of his mouth or my mouth, he says it was his, I say it's mine, doesn't matter. We suddenly thought, what about a audio on internet program, regular, called We Are Listening, hosted by our resident radio expert, Ahmed Dents. And we thought that was a good idea. We asked you and you said, yeah. So that's how it happened. Simple as that. And I have to, for 5 months now or so.
And I have to say, the value has been great. We've had a lot of wonderful guests, and it's spurred a lot of great conversations, not only from the guests, but from patrons, from board members, from other theater professionals. I mean, this platform is now even being used by some organizations as part of their EDI training. Like, they're actually using some of these interviews as part of their training. So it has turned out to be a great platform. And I know all the artists that come on are really appreciating it. What we hear back from, like I said, everybody, donors, patrons, other board members, other theater professionals, everybody is really digging it. Let's get into the meat and potatoes, and I'll throw the link, or Sharisa, you could throw the link to the action plan actually in the chat so people can go check it out later on, or if they want to browse through it while we're talking about it. let's get into it, Sam. Let's open up and tell me, let's talk to everybody about basically wherever you want to start at about, either the origin or the coming forward, just wherever you want to start at about the action plan.
Let me see if I can summarize it, because it's very long. I don't know how many pages and what size font, but it's very long because it's comprehensive. It's a 360-degree look at our organization, from audience ushers all the way to board of trustees, with a focus on trying to transform our company into a truly equitable, fully inclusive, extremely diverse, anti-racist theater organization. And one of the cores of that action plan and that activity is 50% BIPOC, Black, Indigenous, people of color. That's what BIPOC stands for. Representation across the board, board of trustees, artistic leadership, staff, rep actors, rep designers, rep production staff, that with a goal over 3 to 5 years of reaching this at least 50% threshold, which would make the experience for everyone in the institution, I think, quite different than it is now. I'm not sure what it would be like, but I know that it would, at least on paper, represent a great giant step towards equity and inclusion and diversity. As early steps in the plan, 2 things have happened. One is we've announced some promotions. We promoted Danielle Ward, who's our literary manager, to associate artistic director. We've promoted Patrice Amon, who's our Latinx projects producer, to associate artistic director, both of them joining Todd Salovey. And we promoted you, Ahmed, to a member of the artistic team as development and artistic associate. Now, from my point of view, this not only represents a recognition of the wisdom and talent that Danielle and Patrice and you, Ahmed, bring, but the perspective and point of view that you bring to the table. Danielle identifies as a queer woman. Patrice identifies as a Latinx woman, and you're obviously an African-American man. So suddenly we have, at the artistic leadership table on a regular weekly basis, a much greater diversity of voices than we did 3 weeks ago.
Right.
So that's a step, and I'm proud of that step. And secondly, we are in the process of engaging a consultant to take ourselves and members of the board of trustees, ourselves meaning the staff of the rep, and members of the board, through an anti-racism training process. And we're interviewing nationally respected specialists who do this. And it's a fascinating conversation. I'll just share one thing that was said today by someone we interviewed, and she said, by the way, they're all women. She said, quote, "Racism learns to stay in power," end quote. And we were talking about what happens after you go through anti-racism training, and what does your company look like? And she says, well, it's an ongoing process. It never ends, because racism is crafty and eager for power and learns to mutate to find power, which I thought was a fascinating observation. Those are the first 2 steps we've taken. The action plan was developed in detail by Kim Heil, Patrice Amon, and Danielle Ward, who we thank for that heroic work. I can try to summarize it. It's quite lengthy. The first sort of 5 elements to the plan, and the first is to widen the lens of diversity through all the artistic programming, to advance racial justice and multicultural equity. The core of that is this 50% BIPOC representation, that the 50% of the plays, 50% of the artists on stage, at least 50, to advance, and also women, to at least 50% of the people and the artists and the work is written by women, performed by women. So there's a double, even larger than those 2 areas, because it includes lesbian, gay, bi, trans, queer, women, neurodiverse, playwrights with disabilities. to advance our Here, HEAR, Us Now commissioning program, in which we commission new plays by BIPOC artists, almost exclusively at this point, to try to, create a more diverse landscape of possibility, what's on stage, to produce a Black Lives Matter reading series, which we're going to do in March. Delicia Turner Sonnenberg is going to work with us as a co-curator with Danielle Ward, with Kimberly King, and with you, Ahmed. It's called San Diego Rep Black Voices 2020 play reading series, to advance our Latinx festival towards becoming the premier Latinx new play festival in the country, and to build a new play development program under the umbrella of the Jewish Arts Festival, which is happening, set to debut, in June, that Todd Salovey and Rebecca Myers are working on for the Lipinski Family San Diego Jewish Arts Festival. The second overriding sort of category is to reframe the organizational structure from an anti-racist and anti-bias perspective. And that means to augment our current senior leadership with more Black, Indigenous people of color, to create an ongoing proactive recruitment process to find and interview BIPOC candidates for all jobs across the company, to generate an additional associate artistic director position for a virtuoso theater artist who has significant experience in the making of Black theater. That's coming a year or two down the line, this new position, to generate a new general manager position with careful consideration of BIPOC candidates, and to look at the succession of myself as artistic director and Larry Aldridge as managing director, to look at the succession of us into our jobs, from our jobs, with an eye on BIPOC candidates for our positions. And then something that we actually learned from listening to We Are Listening is the thought of entry-level positions for BIPOC young people, and the thought of creating entry-level positions for young ushers to usher for our plays who are BIPOC. We think would be very exciting, because we do several things, not only give employment to people, but also a message will be sent when you come to the Lyceum. You will see a diverse group of ushers welcoming you here. And I think that's an important visual message, if you will. We want to display our goals and our results online to be transparent, and we want to share photos. So we're identifying who the people of San Diego Rep are, and you can tell by a photo a lot of things. So the third area is to establish best practices throughout, to eliminate systemic racism throughout the organization. That's hiring an EDI specialist to train us, developing EDI specialists on staff. EDI is equity, diversity, inclusion. To distribute a harassment and anti-racism policy to all the people who join us when they join the company, just like they get a anti-harassment statement. There would be an anti-racism statement, and actors first day of rehearsal would receive a statement of such. And to undo Native invisibility, to begin recognizing that we make work on the ancestral land of the Kumeyaay, Lusueño, Cahuilo, and Cupeño people. You'll hear that happening once we're back together again. Large overview, we want to deepen community engagement, patron experience. We're going to listen to other people, ask them, what can the Lyceum do for you? What could you do in the Lyceum? We want to share resources with local BIPOC artists and theaters. We want to host an annual nesting residency once a year for a BIPOC theater company. They'd be in residence at the Lyceum. We want to create a permanent gallery space for Indigenous people's art, and to exhibit BIPOC art in our art galleries. We want to help, if you will, the field that we call it of American theater by focusing on BIPOC artists of color. We want to grow We Are Listening. We want to participate, which we are, in a national conversation around these issues. We want to build partnerships with theaters of color around the country. Right now, we have a partnership with St. Louis Black Rep and Theater from St. Louis and Theater Alliance from Washington, D.C. to co-develop a new play by two African-American writers called Beyond the Crossroads. So that's exciting for us. We've never done that before. We want to create an artistic fellowship for early career BIPOC actors and deepen our connections to local universities and faculty who are BIPOC students and or faculty. So there's a big, I'll take a breath now. That was my attempt to summarize about 3 months of work by a lot of people. And there we go. That's what we tried to do.
Talk to me a little bit about, for people who are looking at this, no wonder I have a headache and I have my glasses on. For people who are maybe not understanding the difficulty or the amount of work it takes to put together a plan like this, or to have the right group of people to even venture in. That, like, people can talk all they want, like, this is not easy work. This is not something that's easy to do. What was the experience like with everybody here and everybody who worked on this and putting it together? Like, what were fears or?
Well, first of all, I do want to credit this group that published these, what I call manifestos. That We See You, White America, and that was a description, and the second document was a list of demands. Because our team, Kim Heil and Patrice Amon and Danielle Ward, who did the draft of this document of our strategic action plan, used those two publications, We See You, White American Theater, as a source document, and literally discussed every single entry on their document, that how it might apply to us. So interesting, in the history of the march towards racial justice is a phrase I will use for the moment. Some could argue if it's been a march or a journey that looks like that. This is the first time that BIPOC theater artists have been so clear and bold and courageous and specific to identify systemic racism and white supremacy in American theater. I've never seen it before. When these documents came out this summer, we were all shocked. Now, they came out in context, of course, with what was happening in the streets of America this summer. So I credit those people who had the courage to publish these documents. I credit Kim and Danielle and Patrice. And ironically, a document like this, maybe not ironically, mutates every time we talk about it. In fact, every time we discuss what should we do first or next, people want to change the language. In fact, I changed some of the language in the presentation to you right now.
Right.
So it's a mutable, ongoing, because that march I'm referring to will never end. I mean,
right.
We don't live in an equitable, just society right now. And when we're able to say that we do, I don't know when that's going to be.
Right. Right. I think that's always been an important part of the conversation, is to understand that, like anything else, like it will, it has to have room to breathe and grow and change as times change. Yeah. And appreciate what progress you can make. I mean, I asked in an interview today, I asked this woman who's a specialist in this training, I said, well, what will it look like when San Diego Rep is a anti-racist, equitable, honorably, I don't know what word, respectably diverse organization? She said, well, amongst other things, people will be able to breathe easier. I thought, well, there's an interesting concept. I do like that you mentioned the person we did talk to today, how she talked about, how moving forward, how racism always finds its way back, because it's a very strong organism. It's a very strong thing. Yeah. As we were talking about it, I was saying how that's always, here and we are listening, that's always seems to be the caveat that we're always talking about. It's like, is this just a moment? You know, is this just a moment that's going to fade away? Is this just going to be like another a heated summer? But then the minute all the COVID restrictions are lifted, and everybody can go back to work and go back to doing what they do, does all this work fade away? Do all these sentiments fade away? You know, do all these statements just fall into the background? How confident are you, and how much of that thought went into the plan when you all were putting it together?
Well, I don't sense any reticence to dive headlong into this plan. The limitations are going to be the pandemic and the economic situation we're in. I mean, we work in a company that's central and essential purpose has been on pause.
Mm-hmm.
Which is a positive way to look at it. We're on pause, you know. We cannot assemble, we cannot congregate, we cannot gather. That's what we do, that's what we offer. So, as you know, we've been very robust in our online programming. And I think we just stand out in that manner, but we're still not coming together. There are people that I work with. You come to the building, I do too, to the Lyceum. But there are people I work with online who I have not seen in 7 months in person.
Right.
You know,
right.
I'm working with them every day, and we're doing a lot of product, but have not seen them in 7 months. So it would be foolish to suggest that, you know, we're on an even clean playing field and we can launch into this, tackling this plan with no obstacles, because we have a major economic obstacle and also a health obstacle right now. But this is something that I believe in, and I'm like I said, I'm a very curious person. I'm frankly fascinated by the question of what will this organization look like and sound like and be like if it takes major steps towards what we're talking about, the things I just described.
Mm-hmm.
Well, what if that happened? What would we be like? And I don't know the answer to that.
Right.
And
right.
I'm really curious to see what we can achieve. And that's very motivating.
Can you speak a little bit towards in looking at that and looking to the future and like how we, you know, we live in a society now, even with this, you know, it's a now society. Like everything is now. Like people don't even read anymore because they get all their information in somebody's Facebook or Instagram posts. They don't even know how to read books or whole articles anymore. And I guess the reason I say that is how we were talking about a little bit earlier today about how we have to be patient and temper the expectations of moving forward with these plans, because there are things that have to be done in a way to where we have to be able to talk to people in person. We have to be able to see, people's work in person. We have to see stuff that they've put on stage or how they act in person. Like everything cannot be done in a digital way. Every person cannot be hired in every industry in a digital fashion. Can you talk a little bit to that and how to temper the expectations moving forward? Because I think sometimes we get in what we're living in, but I think sometimes we don't deal like here in San Diego, we deal with the anticipation to be able to do what we want to do, but then we move into the purple tier and we have to temper the expectations of what we want to do with the reality of the situation that we live in.
Yeah. Well, every time we talk about a project that's anything but a Zoom project, we start to talk about the health standards that are in play and the protocol and Screen Actors Guild protocol and Actors Equity protocol and, you know, an individual willingness to venture out of their homes and to come to the theater. You come here, I come here. Not everybody on our staff will come here. Mm-hmm. And that's their choice, and we respect that. You know, I don't know. I mean, we have a bunch of plays that we'd like to produce live.
Right.
I don't know when those are going to happen. Hopefully in 2021. The vaccine news is the first encouraging piece of information on that front I personally have heard in a long time, but I'm not an expert in this question. So on the other hand, the idea of aspiration, of having a dream, of having a wish for a better place, for a larger table, a more inclusive, larger circle, if you will, can be very motivating, I think, and very can fuel a lot of work and a lot of progress and a lot of energy. And hopefully this plan will do that, and the training that we will go through will do that. I know we're going to be in conversation with some people who've been thinking about, frankly, racism and justice and equity and inclusion for a long time, and are very, very, these are people of color, who are very well versed in the challenges that are faced. So I'm optimistic, but it's also, you know, the triple whammy of economy and pandemic and racial justice of 2020, the
Right.
year some people would like to start a fire and burn it.
Yeah,
Right?
exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
So
Let's switch a little bit to I want to ask you about board considerations, get your thoughts on board considerations. We have 2 new board members, Jasmine Sadler, who will actually be on with us tomorrow night here on We Are Listening, and Jean Long. Let me get your thoughts about how important that is as that figures into this plan, and not just the plan here, but nationwide in this industry with theaters moving forward as far as diversifying the boards. What are your thoughts or expectations on that?
I'm going to say something, and I've never quite figured out the most kindest, respectful way to say this, but white people can be very blind to what it means if you're not a white person. And they can say, what's the problem? What's the issue? What's the story?
Yeah.
I've seen that for decades in my life. And what's all the ruckus about? You know, why isn't everybody upset? You know, those kind of questions. And it goes back to what Amiri said, is that I don't have to know in this culture. I can get by with knowing only about me, but you got to know about me and you, you know, so creating opportunity for more conversations with people who have different background, different racial, ethnic makeups, different religions, different cultures, is really important to me. And it's the truth of America today. The truth of America today is it is a diverse, multicultural society, still ruled in power by white people, you know, mostly. But so finding platforms for more conversation is important to me, and representation, and as I said, to make the table bigger and expand the size of the circle and the colors of the circle. Messages are sent when diverse groups come together and you can see that group is diverse. That's a different message than 10 white guys.
Yeah.
So there are a lot, let alone the end of the, not to by any means ignore the individual talents of our new trustees and skills and expertise in business and community interests. So there are just a lot of reasons that inclusion and diversity make for a richer, I think, more rewarding, more provocative experience in life. That's what I think. And it's so easy to retreat to what we know.
Right.
You know, years ago, we used to say, we want to do plays that challenge your preconceptions rather than reconfirm your preconceptions. And both are actually quite pleasurable. People love to go see something that hits their comfort zone and they can just sit back and enjoy it. And then there's the other kind of curiosity is for provocation and change and something new and a different point of view. But I think multiple voices, points of view, backgrounds, traditions, different pieces of music, different languages. We did a play in City Heights 20, 30 years ago, and the first scene of the play was a rap tune built around the word hello in 28, all the languages that are spoken in City Heights.
Right.
It's more than 28, I think, but it was a rap song built around, done by 3 people around how many ways you can, and you say hello in how many languages. And we worked in City Heights for a while, which was very exciting because it was one of the most diverse communities in America. So
let me ask you this, especially from your position, from the artistic director position. You're the second artistic director we've had. We had Sheldon Epps on here, which was a great conversation to have. Has there been, and not to name details, just in general, have you received like any pushback on the plan or to institute the plan? Have you received any type of pushback or, naysayers that like, you can't do this. This is not realistic. Why are you wasting your time with this? What are you doing?
I can't say that I have. The plan has only been public for, I think, a couple of weeks, maybe 10 days. I can't say that I have. I have had this asked of me, what took you so long? That's been asked. What took you so long?
Sure.
Okay. Good question. Fair question. Maybe she's listening. She'll know who it was that asked me that question.
And just on a personal note, and like I said, this is a partnership with La Jolla Playhouse and the Old Globe, and I think looking on the horizon, we're looking at a time where we can possibly have you and Chris Ashley and Barry Edelstein all on this together to talk about this. But I want to ask you just from your point of view as an artistic director, and I know we have some questions coming into the chat. If you guys have questions, please put them in the chat, whether you're on Facebook or you're watching on Zoom. How has this, like we know here on everyone I work with and in Zoom calls, we know what this has done to us, and we know what this has done to patrons who are waiting for this, for us to be able to get back to do what we do. How is this whole lockdown and not being able to do the work we do? How has this affected you? Like how has this affected you? And because like I said, we all talk about it all the time, but how has this personally affected you not being able to do the work that we usually do?
Well, I miss I used to say, and I still think it's true, that theater did not exist until you had an audience. You can write a play, good for you. You can rehearse and stage a play, good for us. You can present the play, great. But if you don't have an audience to share the storytelling event, it's not theater. Well, we don't have an audience in the room to share the event. So call it what you will, the gathering, the coming together, the going to church, the theater version, which is theater is like church, the sense of community that's built. We don't have it in the Lyceum. You can't come here now. We have a gate around us. They're doing a giant remodeling of the mall and building a new elevator for our access to the theater. So I miss it tremendously. There are a lot of very potent pieces of online video that one can watch that come out of the best theater artists in America. I'm not talking about Netflix. I'm talking about what's online that we're putting out, others are putting out. And that's great. And I have a friend who's retired and who's on lockdown, basically, who doesn't go out of his apartment, who sends me reviews of the Richard II that's online, or this version of the Scottish play, or the best one ever. Thank you, Tom. So I miss it terribly. And it was depressing me for quite a while in the beginning. At first, in the beginning was like, oh, this will be over a few weeks.
Yeah.
I remember those days. Oh, April 12th, the president said it will be healthy by Easter. Remember that?
Right.
Remember that? And then when we realized how long it was going to go on, it was depressing for a while. It really sucked, and it still does. But we are able to generate a fair amount of, I think, significant artistic product, and have been very active in making. We made a couple of films, but I'll tell you, I made the film JQA, right, which we're still streaming through the 29th, I guess.
29th.
29th, yeah. And we made it in the theater. We designed a set, put it in the Lyceum space, costumed the actors, created a completely locked down backstage situation where there were only 3 members of the crew that would go back where the actors were. They all had their own dressing room. Actors were tested, COVID tested 3 times a week. The rest of it were tested 1 time a week. It was mask wearing all the time. The only time the actors took off masks was when the cameras were actually rolling. And we made it, and we had the experience that was sort of like making a play, but we didn't have an audience. And I'm used to fine-tuning my work with an audience. The audience teaches me, I like to say, how a play really works in a room. I didn't have that experience with JQA. So I was like, well, I think this is the way it should work. Here we go. Let's cut and edit and send it out there. The very end of JQA, usually we begin and end the plays we produce with a circle event. The first day of rehearsal is a giant circle of all the artists and all the members of the staff, and we introduce each other and answer a thematic question about the play. And we end the projects with a toast in the lobby. Neither of these occurred on JQA. And the end of JQA was the 4 actors walking out on stage, 16 feet away from anybody, and waving and saying, "Thank you, everybody. Bye. We'll see you sometime," and walking back to their individual dressing rooms. And it was a bit of a sad moment. You know, it was also exhilarating because we shot this film in 3 days. But so it's hard, but it's what we do.
That's right. Yeah, that's what we do.
We tell stories, and we're telling them online now, but we're still telling them.
That's right.
That's why we exist. You know, in some ways, at first, COVID was challenging, in my opinion, the very reason to exist. If you can't have an audience, why exist? So that question still haunts me over here. Let me go up in the corner here. But the stories are there to be told, and the artists are there to be employed, and we're doing that, and staff, theater pros like yourself to be employed, and that's good. That's happening. And I'm proud that we've been able to sustain and support our smaller, reduced staff, but, you know, around 20 people through these times. So that I'm proud of, because it's a dedicated and skilled, talented, and committed group of theater professionals.
It is. It indeed.
As is the case at the Old Globe and La Jolla Playhouse. And I should say, in respect for them, which I have great respect for both companies, they have each issued their own EDI statement, inspired by the same source, the WCU, White American Theater. And they're each on their own track of time and commitment and process, but they're on it. And I know that an African-American woman has joined the Diversionary Theater, I believe, in an artistic associate position. I'm probably getting the title wrong. And the same is true at Signet Theater. So, and I'm sure there's other efforts happening that I'm just not aware of. So, and a woman just became the general manager of the Miami Marlins baseball team, the first woman in history. So there's a little bit of change happening.
Right. I have a really good
Kamala Harris.
I have a really good question that's come that's come into the chat. It has to do with, of course, financial difficulties that everybody is going through with this. But with already our regular financial challenges that are going on in the industry, The person asked how was the financial feasibility of this plan moving forward?
Oh, the plan that I outlined.
Yes.
The EDI plan.
Yes.
The financial viability. Well, it will cost money. It will definitely cost some money. It includes promotions. It includes adding new positions. It includes paying a deservedly high-priced consultant, a well-compensated consultant, I should say, with more respect. So it definitely costs money, and we're going to try to raise the money to support it, and we're not going to do it unless we can afford it. But it's definitely, again, it's aspirational. It's a desire to be greater than we are now, to be something beyond what we are now, and that does cost money. So, and I know this is true at the Old Globe and La Jolla Playhouse as well, that we're all looking at, well, when can these plans really kick in, and what can we do during COVID, and then what's after COVID, and
right.
what costs, and all of that's in development, in analysis, in planning stages.
Right.
So, but it's not a no cost event. It absolutely, it's valuable progress that will require an investment.
As about all progress does.
I think so. I think so.
A couple more questions. This is a two-part question from BJ Robinson. His first part of his question is, did you have anything to speak of to Carol Foreman's appearance here on We Are Listening? And the second part of his question is, we might have kind of answered this already. What kind of personal growth and development are you making here and now or over the last 6 months?
Well, those are two tough questions. Thank you, BJ.
Told you we got a tough crowd.
Yeah.
They ask good questions.
I know, BJ. Those are good BJ Robinson questions. The experience we had with Carol Foreman that she spoke about on We Are Listening with the project Princess and the Black-Eyed Pea that she wrote was a very difficult experience for me, and I know it was for her, and some other people. And I think I'm just going to leave it at that. It's a very complicated, long, involved story of what happened, and all I can say is I'm sorry for whatever I did that made it difficult and problematic. And I respect Carol as a theater artist immensely, and she's enormously talented. And I'm sorry that project led to some heartache, more than a little bit of heartache, and I'm sorry about that. So I'll leave it there. As far as working on this plan myself, I'm eager to get started. I'm eager to begin the anti-racism training. That's why I wanted to ask this person today, who's not even employed, so what will it look like? Tell me what will it be like, and I know that racism is and I'm going to characterize this but sneaky, and sometimes it's overt, and sometimes it's very closeted and underneath and in the corner, and sometimes hard to root out, and sometimes in your face. And I think the sneaky in the corner, hard to root out elements of it are going to be the hardest to address, and perhaps the most interesting to discover, because where that virus, if you will, lurks in us, me, you, excuse me, other people, I don't know. It's different for each. I just know it's there, and we must address it. We must do what we can. We must open the door and start walking towards a better place.
The next question is from Susan. I am sorry, Susan. I do not want to butcher your last name. I don't want to be disrespectful, but you know who you are. Can you please expand on your idea of what this, in quotes, will look like? Specifically, what would a board meeting look like? It almost sounds as if you're looking to tick boxes: one Native American, one Filipino, one Black individual, one person of Japanese descent, one person of Chinese descent. Um, so you'll need a large table.
Yes. Yes. I'm sorry.
That was the question. So.
Well, yes, the metaphor of the large table is right on, Susan. Yes, the table needs to be larger. I mean, if I retire and Larry Aldridge moves and starts another career, there'll suddenly be two leadership positions available that could be filled by people of color, BIPOC people. But rather than displacing people, perhaps there's another way of expanding, of sharing the authority and power, of expanding the size of the table, expanding the size of the circle, which will cost money. And there's the rub. That's the tricky part of this, is a lot of American theater's leadership is white, and a lot of it is white male. I mean, Barry, Chris, myself, there's three of us.
Right.
There. Years ago, when I started doing the work that was focused on diversity and more voices, I said, well, the fastest thing I could do to diversify this organization is to quit and hire a person of color to replace me. And I wasn't being flip. I was not being flip when I said that. That was started saying that like 30 years ago. And I said, the other side of me says, well, no, I'm a professional. I founded the company. I'm proud of what we do, so I'm going to keep going. I'm not going to do that then. But yes, the table needs to be larger. There need to be more seats at the table. And yes, you're right, Susan. When you read it, it starts to look like checking boxes. But I'm going to respond to what you wrote in another way. That list of people at the table that you mentioned, I'd love to be at that table. That could be really an interesting place to be, because you think of the diversity you just described. So I don't think of it as checking boxes, but it's conscious and it's overt, and it's there in the plan that we want to expand the representation.
Next question from my guy, Mr. Victor Chan. What's up, Victor? Are there any plans on including more Asian representation in the artistic programming at the Rep?
Yes. We started. We noticed the glaring omission of works by Asian writers about 5 years ago, and we started producing a play by an Asian American pretty much every year since then. And yes, that will continue as we go forward. That's really just what I will say. The two of the commission plays are by Filipino Americans in the commissions we've done, and plays we're considering to produce include plays by Asian American writers. So yes, absolutely.
Another question. It's actually, I never even thought about this, but this is curiosity. Do you feel that, and there's different fits, different sizes. Do you feel that the size of our board needs to expand?
Well, the board, I believe, okay, I might get caught here now with some numbers, because I'm on the board, and I've been on the board for quite a while, and I've been around the board for 45 years. So I believe right now there's a maximum of about 16 positions, and I believe about 11 or 12 are filled. So there's room to expand without even changing the bylaws. And yes, I think a larger board could be very beneficial for the organization, and it will be required to achieve some of these goals we're talking about.
I have another question for Facebook that I could tell this is the answer to this question is just going to depend on time, but I'll ask it to get your opinion. When vaccines kick in and the pandemic ends, how do you see the Rep reopening, with large crowds or with smaller audiences as they get used to being together in theater again?
Well, I think most of us in the profession believe that no matter what we do, there will be people, once a vaccine is here, that will still not want to come to the theater, because they're going to want to wait to find out if the vaccine works from other people who got inoculated, and let those other people go to the theater and come home and maybe go again and not get sick. I think there's a group of people that we're going to wait. So I believe then the size of the audience is going to shrink up front. Now, separately from that, there's the question of, and very likely possibility, that there will be the need for social distancing in the seating. So, for example, in the large Lyceum stage, which is 525 seats, we think we could get, I think, about 220 seats in there.
Sounds
People
about right.
seated apart. I don't remember the exact amount, and that would be okay to.
That sounds feasible.
Yeah, and that's, some of those are not going to be wonderfully delightful seats in terms of view, but as far as the Lyceum space, the smaller theater, which is 250 capacity, well, you know, maybe that's going to be 60 or 70 seats. You start to get into a question of economics, then can you afford to do plays for 60 people? Now, right. You can in some theaters, some smaller theaters, absolutely. So yes, the audience will take a while to come back, and there will be protocol in place, not only for the audience. You know, you go to the grocery store, you go in one door, you come out another. Think of the Lyceum. What's the entry? What's the exit? What do you do in the bathroom and intermission? All kind. But also the artists. That the backstage area has to be safe. And you cannot have the virus running around backstage. So controlling that. So there will be a lot of COVID testing coming ahead, I think. But that's all a guess.
Yeah, that's what I was going to say. I was going to add on to that. There's so many factors that go into that as we move through time. I mean, there's the factors of when are, you know, as many of you might be eager to come back and watch a show. You have people like my mom who she's not even trying to go back to church when they open the doors. You know, she's not even ready to walk back out into that environment yet. So that's going to depend on, you know, what the guidelines are, how the vaccine works, and what is the overall fear factor of, you know, patrons wanting to get back into this, where we know there are diehards that want to get back into this, but there are people who are going to be scared to get back out when this opens. Had a message from name, you know, Mr. Kevin Burrows, who just said it was great to see us sitting here talking about all this, and that every time he was here at the Rep that he felt welcome. So shout out to you, Kevin.
Thank you.
You know, as we get ready to wrap things up, Sam, and again, thank you for taking the time to join us. I know I told you a while ago, I'm like, you know, we're gonna get to the point where they're gonna want to hear from y'all. You know, like they're gonna get tired of looking at my face. They're gonna want to hear from y'all directly. As we get ready to close out the conversation, can you give me a little something to leave with everybody who's watching, as far as not only as far as the plan moving forward for the Rep, but maybe how do you, and like we've been talking and saying, you know, it's hard to see things going forward, but, you know, do you have any idea? Because I know you're a very thoughtful person. Like I've worked with you now since 2007. What kind of personal aspirations, or what kind of personal visions or optimistic visions do you see for our industry moving forward, not only coming out of COVID, but as we move forward into this attempt to diversify and represent, you know, all the people in this country on stage moving forward?
I'm not even sure what the question is, but I will answer this question. I'll give you this answer.
It was a weird question.
Two things are really important to me. One is virtuosity on stage. I think that it's essential that the work we do be of the highest quality that we can achieve. And that's very important to me. And that's why we spend the money that we spend. And that's why whatever rigor we apply to our standards is applied for that reason, because I believe audiences recognize and appreciate virtuosity. Okay, there's three. Secondly, I believe that being provocative in your storytelling telling stories that open eyes, open doors, light matches, start little fires, maybe start arguments, cause people to go, aha, or what? That sort of shock of amazement, of discovery, are essential to the making of theater. And then finally, just having a rich diversity of voices in the room, and that room is America, and that room is San Diego Rep and the Lyceum. It's both. You know, the San Diego that I grew up in, because I'm a native, is not the San Diego I live in now.
Yeah,
it's a different place.
It's completely
so
different.
Change is possible, and transformation can happen, and it's possible that we can move towards a higher ground. Boy, has 2020 been tough on that.
Rough. It's been a rough one.
That quest, but I keep believing that higher ground is there to be reached for and should be reached for, and it's one of the things that keeps us alive,
right?
Healthy,
right? As we get ready to wrap it up, like I said, we do have a couple of events online that are going down. Want to give everybody any words about JQA as it is streaming through the 29th? Any words you want to say to everybody listening who maybe has not seen it yet or wants to take another trip at looking at it?
You know, people really, I think, respond very positively to JQA. It's a very tight 82 minutes of deep, provocative thought about what a government should do for its citizens and what the role of politicians is in that, in government, and how do you balance the quest for the public and the private in your life? That's an important part of the piece. But it's just a juicy and delicious political argument about what the hell should we be doing,
right,
as a government for the people of the country that we rule. And I think that's a fairly important question to be asked, and this piece does answer it multiple times. One of my favorites being Frederick Douglass, who sits down at the table and puts his fist down and looks at John Quincy Adams and says, "Do more, Mr. Adams, do more."
Right.
So there's my answer to the other question. Do more. It's in the play. It's in JQA.
Well, look, Sam, we'll go ahead and wrap this thing up. Again, I want to say thank you for coming on and talking to everybody about the plan. Again, you guys can head on over to sdrep.org and check it out. Sharisa put it in the Zoom chat, but if you head onto our website, you can take a listen. As Sam just talked about, JQA is streaming through November 29th. You can get your tickets at sdrep.org. Also, don't forget, tomorrow I will be back. Jacole will be back co-hosting with me, and we'll be talking to our new board member, Jasmine Sadler. And I don't know if you knew this, Sam, Jasmine is actually a real life rocket scientist. Like, that's not hyperbole or something to just hang on her. She's a real rocket scientist and trained ballerina, and she's on our board. So
I know that.
That's really cool. We'll also be talking to John Brooks, who is a rep patron and also a board member at Moxie Theater and a filmmaker. He actually has a film that will be coming out pretty soon. And we'll be talking to Stephanie Bolger, who is on the board at the Old Globe. Don't forget to get your tickets for the Klezmer Summit tomorrow night at 7:00, right after We Are Listening. And also get your tickets for A Paris Love Story, live from Florence, starring, of course, Hershey Felder. That will begin streaming on November 22nd. Sam, again, thank you very much for joining us.
Thank you.
Hopefully we'll have you back on at the beginning of the year with Chris Ashley and Barry Elderstein. Hopefully we can get that together and we can have a really a great conversation. But thank you again, Sam. Thank you to all of you for listening, and I'll be back here at the same time tomorrow. You're listening. Good night, everybody.
Good night.